Today I'm going to do something a little different. I know I said I wasn't going to do any INFJ videos, but hey, you know, the number 2 rule to being an INFJ is never leave your fellow INFJs behind. So, yeah, I'll do a couple videos here and there, you know. But today we're going to talk about the 10 secrets of the INFJ. Let's get into it. So, you know, I read a lot of forums. I watch a lot of, you know, YouTube videos on different topics, but especially with INFJs as it pertains to this subject. And I read, you know, different forum posts, blogs, articles, and so forth. And I really think that a lot of these articles are very misleading. Because yes, in theory, a lot of these abilities or personality traits do exist. However, because they are social, they are live, they are breathing, right? They are evolving. It requires extensive amount of practical application, which means social interaction, right? Real world dealings with people.
Joshua Waitzkin, in his book, The Art of Learning, which is a great book you should pick up sometime, he talks about this idea, he calls it numbers to leave numbers, right? And this is his philosophy of learning, which I very much agree with. The idea is you get super, super technical. You go over something so slow, so perfect. Make sure your form is exact. Make sure you're doing it the right way. Even if it's not game applicable, you get the fundamentals down so well that they become utterly ingrained. They become the most natural, most the easiest thing for you to possibly do. When the fundamentals are handled, you no longer have to think about them. And that's where you're going to get to those moments of genius. It's when the fundamentals have become so ingrained that your brain is freed up to think about the advanced things. And then the advanced things have become so ingrained that your brain is free to think about anything and everything, right? And the game comes to you, the game slows down, everything gets easier from there. But it all comes from the fundamentals.
Not only that, it requires a lot of practice, a lot of different interactions in order for us to better understand and employ these personalities, you know, for the betterment of society and so forth and so on. And I cannot stress it, you know, more in the fact that we as a society, right, are coming to terms with social media, technology, and so forth, and we're sort of getting away from the human element, right? From that social dynamic, which you see here.
I think that, as I said before, I think that social media is the most asocial, or even antisocial, invention ever. It atomized, pulverized, rendered the social fabric completely. The number of face-to-face interactions among teens dropped by 70%, 7-0, not 7-0, in the last 10 years.
We spend our lives on the internet. We're no longer really interacting with people in the real world. You know, even if you're walking down the street, you're on your fucking cell phone all the time. You go home, you chat on Facebook. Probably most of your friends, you chat with them more on Facebook than in person. Or on WhatsApp more than in person. It's like you'd rather text. Relationships now, guys would rather, they like the relationship where they text more so than in person. It's crazy. There's that saying like long distance relationships don't work. At this point, we're getting more and more hooked on the long distance. It's like we'd rather get our little hit of text and let our imagination fill it in. And then it's kind of in person, you're like, there she is. But then you get your hit when you're like traveling. It's crazy. Like I have friends like that. They'd rather be further away, and they keep going for girls where it's like long distance just so they can get the high off the text back and forth.
So again, funny enough, because our types, we are so social, right? in terms of understanding the different dynamics, different perspectives, the underlying roots of all things, we are in danger of all individuals of actually losing our abilities to have that deeper perspective, right? Because sometimes we can sort of get too involved with technology that we sort of lose ourselves, and we lose the importance of being in that real world state. You know what I'm saying to you? And, you know, obviously this is not to undermine any other INFJs who are watching this, but again, it's like there's this this mindset, this default mindset of like, oh well, you know, we are, you know, NI dominant, so therefore our inferior, you know, functions such as, you know, SE or TI, you know, we can't really use them, and therefore I am like that because I have these functions and so forth, not realizing that it's incumbent upon us to really go out there and practice and practice and practice. And for us, what makes us really stand out, it's not the individual functions, but it's all functions combined, all 8 functions combined. Some of us who have that SI, right, as old dude says here,
at least I have extroverted feeling to be able to find other FI users and use my FE to absorb their feelings and just straight up ask them how they feel about this. And because I'm an SI user, I can remember that over time, right? We'll talk more about that later. But I can remember their reaction over time and actually plan my interactions based on, you know, how this person would typically feel, how an FI user in this situation would typically feel, right?
Okay, we have that ability to recall interactions. So we know, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this, but I know after I have dealt with you or have dealt with you in the past, I know how to navigate and so forth and so on. So it's basically that recollection that we're tapping into. So, but the more that you engage, the more that you learn, the more that you observe, the more that you study and say, oh, that's what this is, that's what that is, then you can now practice that, go through different scenarios and be able to employ, you know, and get better at it. So let's talk about the 10 secrets, right? And it's funny because most of them interrelate, you know. It's just basically a different way of expressing them, you know, different minor details, but at the end of the day, it's all the same. It's all comes from the same place. So let's talk about the first one, right? I'll leave a link to this. It's called the introvertdeer.com /news/INFJ-secrets. Okay. In the event that I forget to post a link, because I do that often. It says, number 1, on a different wavelength. It's a given. We know this, right? We're just different. We're just different, right? INFJs may feel like perpetual outsiders. That's because most people aren't on the INFJ's wavelength. Explain Antonio Dodge and Joel Mark. Okay, the INFJ's dominant function is introverted intuition, and it is the main way that that type processes information and interacts with the world. Okay, introverted intuition subconsciously notices patterns. Introverted intuition subconsciously notices patterns, but guess what? Where does this pattern come from? It comes from
massive repetition of social interaction is the only way to cultivate a noticeably improved level of social intelligence. You want to have that biggest data set that you possibly can to draw from. And so again, let me say it again. Massive repetition of social interaction is the only way to cultivate a noticeably improved level of social intelligence.
Okay? If you put it this way, if you are at home and you don't engage, right, with different levels of people, different types of, personalities in different elements, then you have nothing to base these patterns on. You see what I'm saying to you? Like, you can't recall them because you haven't experienced them. We don't get these understandings through osmosis. It just doesn't come. You see what I'm saying to you? Like, you have to be exposed to different types of people, different conditions, different situations. And not only that, you have to now be met and sort of like blow through these, right? Like overcome them and learn from them, learn how to better manage them, come back, reassess, figure out, okay, what did I do here? What did I do wrong? What happened? As in this video here.
And it doesn't matter who you are. It's like, go out and, like, as a little daily ritual, every day just talk to 3 new people. If you just do that, you will get so much fucking value, because that's how you develop that social intelligence. And then, as someone said here, it's like, start noticing the different dynamics. Start asking yourself, okay, what was the person thinking or feeling? Don't just get so caught up in you, because that happens too. You're going up, you're like, what about me? Will they see the little wrinkle in my shirt? Are they judging me? Can they see this? Oh my God, what are all these other people thinking of me? It's like me. It's like, get out of your head. Okay, what about this other person? What are they feeling? What are they thinking? What happens if I say something like this in this context? What if I say it this way? Okay, that doesn't click. What about like this? And then you start recognizing different patterns. That's the key to social intelligence. It's massive social references and pattern recognition. You go out and you interact with thousands upon thousands of people. You're gathering more social experiences than most people would in their entire fucking lives. And then you start getting a feel for what's appropriate and when, and that's a fucking skill set that more and more people are lacking.
And that's how we get better, and that's how we can subconsciously store this information. But again, that's why I said it's kind of misleading, because you're told, yeah, like, I'm on these wavelengths, I'm on a different wavelength, because people don't get it, and we have we notice these these subconscious patterns. But guess what? I've been exposed to more in life than you have. I've been involved in different career fields and have had to manage different types of people in different career fields, right? So from extreme to the less extreme. So guess what? My subconscious and the pattern recognition is deeper than yours, because you have no experience. Not to say you, I'm saying I'm comparing to someone who doesn't have it, right? Like, you cannot compare me, who has, let's say, again, not to my horn, was a police officer. I went to different types of calls, whether it be, domestic, whether it be burglary, whether it be theft, robbery, home invasion, you name it, right? Also having to deal with now personal trainer, as a personal trainer, dealing with different types of people, young, older folks, people who are mature, who are immature, dealing with in government, right? Dealing with people who are left-leaning, who are right-leaning, dealing with executives, right? Dealing with ambassadors, dealing with military, dealing with outdoor, people who are outdoors, people, dealing with people who are into mechanics, people who are into music, right? So even with all these areas, you have different types of personalities. You have extroverts, you have introverts. And I have to now be able to figure out how to navigate through all these personalities and all these given situations, in order to be able to level myself, so I can counter their reactions to different situations, right? So if I'm having a meeting, for whatever occasion, I have to be able to level that individual and meet that person and know, okay, this person is that kind of a person, so therefore I'm going to approach that person with this. I can't approach that person with this because that person won't be receptive to that.
And these are what we call invisible threads. And that's an old school community term. And invisible threads, quote unquote, are basically made up of all the possible ways that a conversation could branch out from a given starting point. And once you've done enough interactions, thousands and thousands, you'll start to get a pretty good idea of what most of the invisible threads are for a given conversational topic, or a given story, or even a given theme of conversation. And once you know that, it becomes very easy for you to dominate the conversation and control the frame, because you'll basically have a prepared response for any contingency that might arise.
You know what I'm saying to you? Like, it's just so much, and like, you have to know these things. You have to be experienced, and it just doesn't come. And that's why I say it's misleading, because we have all of these people who, yeah, that's me. I feel different. I have intuition and this, but yeah, so what? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're not actually out there and really exposing yourself, and you're just in your own cocoon, so what? Because at the end of the day, when you look on forums, it's mostly of people questioning and worried about other people. Oh, I have this INFJ, person who I'm dating, and that person, can't come to terms when we're having sex, and they're so involved in their SC, and they forget, what they're supposed to be doing. Like, these are the questions that come up. You see what I'm saying to you? Like, abnormal behavior. It has nothing to do with like real world situations in terms of like how to navigate, around other folks, So again, it's just the reality. Like, I'm not making this stuff up. It says, although not necessarily a magic, power or a psychic ability, using their intuition can feel that way because it works subconsciously. Sometimes INFJs will have hunches or gut feelings that they can't explain. Again, where does this hunch or gut feeling come from? It comes from recalling through your subconscious situations that you have encountered previously. Why? Because we are dwellers. We're always thinking. We're always ruminating. We're just in there, always wondering where. Most people, like the extroverts, the sensors, it comes in and out. It's like, oh, I'm not worried about that, because for them, they don't worry about these things. They don't care about these things as much as we do. It goes in and it just goes out. You see what I'm saying to you?
So for example, if I'm talking to someone and let's say I say this, well, I know that, again, there's an infinite number of things they could say, but my experience has taught me that there are about 4 or 5 things that they usually do. And for each of those 5 things, I've cultivated a variety of responses, each one imparting a different emotional tenor to the interaction, taking it in a different direction. And I can pick and choose from there. And for each of those, I know that there's about 3 or 4 things that people usually respond to those, and I've cultivated responses for those as well, so on and so forth, and it keeps branching down and down and down. And of course, the more data sets and the more unique interactions that you have under your belt, the more complete and fleshed out that tree of invisible threads is going to be.
Highly perceptive of others. That's number 2. Again, it's interrelates with what we said before about having a sixth sense and having that psychic ability, and how INFJs may know something without quite being able to put their finger on it. Okay, it's the same thing. Being highly perceptive of others, knowing, what agenda someone may have. Okay, but where does that come from? Pattern recognition. Being able to see that person, again, like I said, there's 7 templates of the human body, right? So which means that when you see someone, you're just like, oh man, like I've seen you before, or I've seen your type before, same fingers, same, characteristics, same features, and so forth and so on. And you sort of have that same personality, like generally speaking, that's who they are. And they speak the way the same, they have same, sort of, it's just a way about them, like their aura is similar. But again, we think about these things because each person that we encounter, we really deeply analyze them and assess them and look at their body parts and this, that, and the third, and we internalize these things, okay? So then when we come to someone else, you're like, oh, okay. It's the same thing with profilers, right? As a law enforcement officer, when I was a detective, again, it's like I'm dealing with an individual. That person's giving me this information. It's like, man, like this matches the same incident here. And then you look at that person, like, oh man, you guys look similar. You look, like, and then like, obviously the new person, oh, okay, this is a new person, new situation. Then you store that, you internalize it, and then maybe like 5, 6, 7, months down the line, something else happens, and then you're like, oh, well, this incident here, and you start matching, like, oh, this person similar. So you use these things based on recollection, but again, it's highly perceptive of others based on interactions. Again, we're humans. We interact. We do the same thing. We go to school. We go to work. We watch TV. We get on the internet. At some point in time, like, we have to circle back. So like these characteristics, these traits, we do the same thing, same sports, same movements, same dance moves, same this, and so things are very, what do you call that again? Cyclical, right? So you start to see these things, but because we are so involved in assessing people's behavior and so forth and so on, we recognize this, where other people is like, I don't give a crap. If you say, hey, that person is, feeling a certain way, really? Like, whatever. You know what I'm saying to you? Which leads to number 3, absorbing other people's emotions. So for example, I can walk into a room, okay? Now this is just naturally, okay? But it's naturally how you feel someone's emotions, but when it comes to being able to walk into a room and know who is off, who is not on, that comes through experience, knowing people, knowing the situation, knowing how to read an entire body, okay, at once, okay, because sometimes when you're not accustomed to doing it, you focus on individuals, or maybe you focus on yourself. But when you've been exposed to, managing, like, let's say 30 people, 20 people, having 10 people in a room, you sort of now develop this ability to say, okay, oh, this person is off, that person is on, or that person is, what have you. And then now, how do you solidify these hunches, whatever? You have to ask. You may be wrong. Okay, then therefore you don't re-engage, or you don't go back to that. The next time you ask, oh, I was right. So then it's stored for later recollection. So you're using your FE as well as your NI, okay, but then also the SE, which is basically your senses, okay. So I'm sensing something, I'm seeing something, okay. The senses meaning I'm seeing movement, I'm seeing this, and that movement is now being internalized, and that now causes you now to react based on that person's emotions, and you say, hey, how are you feeling? So, and then the TI kicks in, and it's like, okay, now I get it, because you did this before and you did that, therefore this is what's happened. You see, so it's all synergistic, and it's not just, one thing working. That's why I said, like, everything is combined. That's why you need to develop all your senses. And that SI basically comes in which we don't normally have SI, but you can develop it, because then now okay, hey, I had a conversation with you, you responded this way, therefore now I'm going to counter you. Like, so I have some volatile people in my office, right? Because we're in the Utah, Vegas area, Nevada area, they like on the weekends to go to Utah because it's so close, and they go base jumping, they go jumping off bridges, they go off of this, off of that. But those are the same type of people that they're very high risk driven personality types. So when that also relates to the personality type of not really showing that you're hurting, so like they're very I don't care type, so if you ask them, hey bro, you look like you're whatever, they won't even go deep into it. They're like, I'm all right. Like, I look like I'm whatever, especially if they don't know you. Like, cool, what are you talking about? Like, they don't want to show their emotions. They don't want to show their weaknesses, you know? So you have to be able to deal with that as well and know how to approach it. So, like, I want to know the answer because I know something is bothering you. So I'm going to use my not manipulation, but my FE judo, right? And be able to navigate and to get that information out from you, you know? Number 4, which is what? Amazing long-range forecasting abilities. Again, do we have to go into that? Because what we just discussed before all ties into that as well. Both emotional and rational. Okay, let's talk about this. Although sensitive and emotional, INFJs often mistype as INTJs, their thinking twin. Due to their third function, introverted thinking, they paradoxically can be quite analytical and scientific. Okay, they may enjoy careers in technology, the sciences, and research.
There are millions of people of my race in the United States who think very reductively because they're told to go into these STEM fields or engineering. And a lot of them are very closed off to the spiritual side of things.
Remember how I told you how I come in contact with a lot of INTJs, that these types, the researchers, the very analytical types, okay?
You know, I do get a lot of engineers on boot camp, and I'm sure in some small part that's due to the fact that I live in Silicon Valley, you know, San Francisco Bay Area, and there are a lot of engineers here, and that's what attracts them to the game. You know, this idea that it's something they can figure out, it's this puzzle. I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to the game, you know, because they think, okay, here are these rules that govern social interaction, and if I learn these rules, I learn these theories, I can protect myself. I can just, you know, go down the flow chart, and I'll never have to feel bad ever again.
They're very afraid of conflict. They're very, like by the book, like they're very, they have low FE, so they don't really, you know, they're not really into the feely stuff. They're more direct. They need more details, right? They deal in low context. They don't deal in abstract. So if you talk to them, you have to come direct at them. You have to give them the details. They're not interested in the fluff and in the big picture and in the long, you know, dragged out, you know, story before you get. It's like, no, get to the point right now. Okay, so that dismissive, that shortness, also you have to relate to that being a less feely person. Like, you have to be able to relate and connect the dots. Someone who's straight to the point is gonna have most of the time of a less feely type of a personality.
The intention to become a more intuitive person and a less logical person. I used to be so hyper focused on logic that, you know, I was certainly closed off to astrology. I was closed off to anything that seemed unscientific. But using logic initially and reading certain books, I started to open myself to the idea that my logic was actually limiting my ability to see the truth. And especially with interactions with people, right? You know, I don't have a lot of conversations with these people about astrology and such, but we're all humans. We're all capable of tuning into energies. So the real difference in how the Westerner processes information is he or she is thinking more about the linear relationship between things. Whereas now, how I think in particular is they start to perceive more. So when you see something happening, you don't just process it from here, okay? You're not like, how does this happening? It's not like a puzzle, right? It's more like, what am I sensing?
But in reality, game is not some simple arithmetic problem you could just plug quantities into to get a standardized result. You know, an interaction is a living, breathing, dynamic thing where the variables are constantly changing in real time.
Whatever. Indeed, INFJs don't outwardly appear as emotional as the ENFJ. It said that INFJs can be too emotional for the thinkers, okay, but too logical for the feelers. okay? Which is true, right? So we can be too emotional for the thinkers in that, like, yeah, like we express ourselves. Like I'll cry, like if I'm giving a speech and, you know, I'm really on it, like I'll cry. And you have the thinkers who don't really want that. It's like, oh, like, I'm not really interested in that. Just get to the point. Like, I'm not really into that. Like, it doesn't really affect me at all. And then sometimes the feelers, like, they get too feely. It's like, oh, bro, like, you know, I get where you're coming from. I get it. You know, I feel the same way. But we need to, you know, adjust, you know, and not be so caught up in, you know, the emotions of others, whatever, because sometimes, you know, we can't all be peacemakers. Sometimes we have to level ourselves, especially as a manager or supervisor or in any given situation. We need to be to level ourselves and to be able to create that dynamic by where we don't get, you know, stepped on.
Very often in psychotherapy, you know, people come to psychotherapy for multiple reasons, but one of them is they often come because they're too agreeable. And so what they get is so-called assertiveness training, although it's not exactly assertiveness that's being trained. What it is the ability to learn how to negotiate on your own behalf. And one of the things I tell agreeable people, especially if they're conscientious, is say what you think. Tell the truth about what you think. There's going to be things you think that you think are nasty and harsh, and they probably are nasty and harsh, but they're also probably true. And you need to bring those up to the forefront and deliver the message. And it's not straightforward at all, because agreeable people do not like conflict. Not at all. They smooth the water in the short term to keep the water smooth and to not delve into those situations where conflict emerges. The problem with that is it's not a very good medium to long-term strategy, right? Because lots of times there are things you have to talk about because they're not going to go away.
Creators of deep emotional intimacy. It all ties in, you know. True introverts. INFJs are sometimes called the extroverted introverts. Yeah, like we can. But again, it's misleading because it's like, yeah, I am an extroverted introvert. But what does that mean? That means that you are supposed to go out there and experience and start noticing patterns. You see what I'm saying to you? Like, you need to go out there, like, on your own. Like, not be out there, like, in party mode and, like, knowing everyone and being like, yeah, this is me and so forth. But really just, you know, engaging in, like, different small circles, you know? Like, so I'll go to this person here who is part of a different, you know, whatever system, but that's only one person. And I go over there, that's another person who's part of a different system, you know? And then I go to you and I'll ask you questions. Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, I'm curious about how does this work? So I'll see a nurse. She's part of a different system, right? So, hey, you know, like when you're working with people and so forth, like how do you, you know, relate to just, you know, all the stress, you know, that comes with these individuals? And do you sometimes find that you are able to, you know, have these conversations with them, and how do you respond to them? How do you react? And you know, just have these conversations with them. And that's how you gather information. You know, you start to figure out, and guess what? So now you can indirectly apply the information that you are given through someone else, and because now you internalize that, and then now when you interact in this situation, because again, most interactions are similar, it's just different based on different career fields, different situations, different dynamics, but they're all the same. You now subconsciously recall that. Subconsciously, you don't realize it, but you subconsciously recall it. Sensitive to conflict. Yes, we are sensitive to conflict, right? Like I've always said in my videos, like I just don't like tension. I don't like, I'll be the first person to say I'm sorry, you know? But again, it's through exposure, right, that you learn. Sometimes if you are the type who is exposed to too much like of that, then you sort of lose your empathy. You lose that sort of soft touch in you, right? And so you sort of like remain in that place of like, you know, like the INTJs, okay? A lot of them, because, you know, they have to use their SE and so forth and so on, and dealing with things, they can you know, what do you call that again? They can develop their SC to the point where there's like a coldness, right? Right? And it's just like they approach situations, you know, through their senses, and it's like they just block it off. It's just like boom, right? And so when a conflict arises, like they can boom, they go straight on, because again, remember, because they're logical people and they don't want to straight on head details and not with the fluff, they'll go straight on, right? Because they've been able to, you know, develop their senses and, you know, not worry about, you know, incoming, and they just go straight on to it, you know. But others, like myself, I'm very sensitive to conflict. So if something happens, I'll dwell on it, and I'll be like wow, you know, like it'll just every so often it'll skip town, you know, and then all of a sudden it comes back in, and like that moment, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, it's just it's bad, but we need to do it because we need to get over these things. End up in one-sided relationships. I don't really believe this. Again, it's misleading, because it says many INFJs are great listeners because they truly care about others, and as introverts, they rarely feel the need to hog the spotlight. Likewise, they enjoy helping others understand their emotions and grow. They're nicknamed the counselor personality for a good reason. Although these abilities allow the INFJ to create a level of emotional intimacy in the relationships like few others can, it also means INFJs tend to get ensnared in one-sided relationships. Again, it's misleading, because if you have these abilities or these exposures, you learn to see the patterns, and you end up not being in these one-sided relationships. Okay, again, it's one of those paradoxes. It's like, okay, like I'm just in love with the idea, right? But when it comes to actually executing, it's not there for many people. 10, looking for their soulmates. INFJ's desire to connect deeply with others. Shallow, one-sided relationships won't do. Likewise, because they're introverts, they have limited social energy. So INFJs look for friends or romantic partner who are their soulmates. These are people who truly click with the INFJ and can feed their very real need for authentic connection, intimacy, and meaningful conversation. Like my wife, she's a Capricorn, but she's also an ESTP. She totally gets me. I'll give you one example of how she gets me. One day I came home and I was dwelling from an incident, and I was like, whoo. You know, I made that sound sometimes when I'm thinking about something and I want to shake it off my head, and I go, you know, I do that often. So then I did that, and my daughter was like, what is that? And my wife said, don't worry about it. It's a family secret. Now I know she has me. I mean, I always know she has me, but again, that reiterates to me that she knows my secret. She knows not to, you know, tease me and say, oh, that's dad being, you know, his weird, you know, self. No. She understands that, and also she hid that because that's my secret, because I'm a private person from my daughter. Okay? So she's got my back. So that's, you know, my soulmate. She understands me, she understands where that comes from, and she understands how I don't want that to be revealed, you know? So, and are you an INFJ? Again, my thing is this, bro. It's like, it's not about whether you are or not. It's, are you using these abilities? Are you exposing yourself in order to gather and internalize and to be further develop all your senses? You know, have your FE, have your FI, if you will, have your TI, have your TE, you know, all of these senses. Are you exposing yourself in order to fully develop your mainstays? Our mainstays are the NI, the FE, the TI, and the SE. Are you doing what you need to be doing in order to maximize these mainstays? If you are, good on you. If not, you need to get to working. Johnny Fontana, Real World NF Scorpio, we out.